Okay, so picking up where we left off, I was talking about at the end of about the difference between bounding box and median point. So let's talk about that right now. If I select this cube, right now I have it set to active element there, so you can see that there's a little, you can barely see it. Let's see, if I set this to 3D cursor, you'll see it. So now the 3D cursor is over there, and you can see this white dot. That is the actual center of this box. Okay, so if I set things back to median point, obviously it's going to snap right to that point that is the center of this object. Okay, now however, if I select this light and these two spheres and the camera, and you will notice that, well, you can't really see that dot, but you will in a second. So it actually shifted a little bit, and we're going to shift it back by changing the center. What it's doing here is it's trying to be at the center of these two while at the same time at the center of these two. And I guess if this was deselected, it's going to move back over to here, and it's going to sort of try to find some mathematical center of these three. I don't know how it does it, but that's more or less what it's doing. And it's different than if I set it to bounding box down here. You will see it move, and it's actually moving right, even though I don't have the camera selected, it's actually moving right to the where that box center is. If I click on the box, you'll see that's where that is. The reason is because the box is creating a bounding box from this. I mean, I put this box in here obviously, and I sized it to match this. It's creating a center from the center, a box from the center of these points. And it so happens to be, I lined up the camera so it's more or less in line with the center of this sphere. And this sphere down here is also in line with the camera. So just to illustrate that without the camera that even with the camera selected and all these spheres, and it's set to bounding box, and it's set to median point, it's going to move a little bit because it's not calculating this bounding box. The difference is with bounding box selected, I can deselect the camera and it doesn't move ever so slightly because I didn't do this real, precisely. But just to illustrate that it's creating a bounding box from these centers, and since these centers are more or less the same, this side of the box is the same. So it's then, after it creates the bounding box between all the centers, then it puts it in the center of that box. It's not the bounding box of the geometry in this case, because we're in object mode, something I'll get into later, but it is the bounding box of the centers of the selected objects. And I put the camera in there. It moves a little bit because I didn't put the camera exactly right there on that center line. So that's the difference between bounding box and median point. I hope that makes sense. For most things, you won't run into a reason to have that difference, but again, when you really need it, it will be there, and you should know what the difference is. Mostly people will go from active element to median point in that sort of range right there. 3D cursor is real common. It's very useful in the individual origins. It's a great feature, and it comes in use a lot. All right, so that's about it for this.